Good morning, sir.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. How are you, sir?
Very good, very good.
Respected Dr. Thomas Palakkeel, Professor Rosina Davis, teachers, dear
Yes,
students, a very good morning to all. I'm much delighted to offer a hearty welcome you all on behalf of the department. I welcome you all to the second series of our visiting faculty session. Thank you. I request Dr. Palakkeel, sir, to start the session. Thank you, sir.
all right. So, greetings, everyone. I am so happy to see you all. I see 31 students, I suppose. I'm going to assume that you are PG students. There is a lot of echo
We have PG
feedback.
students with us.
Shall I wait?
So you can start.
Okay. So the first I am receiving a lot of feedback and echo. Trying to see. Shall I start again?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So the first lecture, we saw that Europe coming out of a 1,000+ year long intellectual stagnation in which the church mediated individual public life and private life in such a way that there was no room for anyone, including members of the aristocracy, the 1%, to think of themselves as autonomous moral agents, or human autonomy was not possible. So you all know the term theocracy. So in effect, Europe was a theocracy and a feudal system. And I'm not saying everything was entirely wrong, but it was a long age of stagnation. And every time someone tried to breathe some fresh air into the system, whoever it was, brutally suppressed. For instance, the Middle Ages had two great scientists, potential scientists, Roger Bacon, not Francis Bacon, Roger Bacon from late 13th and early 14th century. He could have been the first chemist. He is credited to inventing or recalibrating the formula for the gunpowder. But he was more than that. He had written a book about cosmology, and he was suppressed. Same with William of Ockham. If he lived in 21st century, he would have been teaching at Harvard or some great place like that, and that kind of individual. So it was not possible for an individual to think in the Middle Ages. And by 14th century, Europe was in a crisis. The papacy, the Pope's office was hijacked by the French. So papacy left Rome. And there was one particular moment when there were 3 different popes in power, claiming to be in power. And then you all know about the Black Death, the sudden decline in temperature and kind of new ice age. And it is possible only 1/3 of the population survived. And in the middle of it, there was a 100-year-long war the English waged against the French, claiming that the France was English territory. So all of those terrible social political events come to a sort of resolution by the year 1485. And by then, printing presses are in operation. English language suddenly shifted from Middle English to what we would call modern English, slowly. And some of the excitement that new forms of economic activity, banking, etc., produced in southern part of Europe started to spread into England and various other locations. So that created the Renaissance. We were talking about it. Printing press, return of new knowledge, books and ideas from the classical age came back into prevalence. At least for 100 years or so, at least the intellectuals decided they were not going to read the Bible or kind of put that aside for the time being, or thinking about the Bible for the time being. They started to think about Plato and Aristotle, Seneca, Epicurus, Plotinus, etc. So that's how a new age arose. And simultaneously, Reformation broke the church into two. And it was a horrible event that we don't have time to go into it. So it is this particular moment. In England, by the way, in England, Reformation was a series of legislations enacted by the English Parliament because it was convenient for the king to break with the church, so that 1/3 of the property in England belonged to the church. So the king just grabbed it, and suddenly the king became very rich. So the king could buy or build ships. The city of London itself started to grow. Radical socio-political transformation took place because of that. However, there was a dialectical change taking place in England in spite of breaking the European dominated or continental Europe dominated Catholic Church. It was Puritans. Puritans were English middle class and lower class people. And because Bible became available beginning in the middle of 16th century, and easily available King James Version coming out in the year 1611. So all of these changes created a new class of people, middle class and lower class, who could read the Bible, who had literacy, and they demanded that they did not want the official Anglican church. They wanted their own Calvinist church. And that fight leads to, and if you think about it, I may have mentioned that in my first lecture, that if you objectively look at Protestant Reformation, it was not the build-up toward a new church. It was actually a rejection of religion itself. Individuals were claiming that they know what to do with their souls, with their conscience, with their Bible. So, as I am trying to claim here, by the middle of 17th century, England had changed, and the best example of that change is that this middle class, lower class English people fought a civil war, and at the end of the civil war, they arrested their king, Charles I, and they tried him in public, and in public they beheaded him. This event happened in the year 1649. Can you imagine? Until then, kingdoms in Europe believed that kings were crowned by God, that kings had divine rights. So a mob, basically, bunch of merchants and traders and masons and carpenters ganged up against the king's army and defeated the king's army and took over the nation, put an end to monarchy. This has never happened before, this kind of event. Certainly not to this scale. So this event is called a Puritan Revolution. And the Puritans, led by Oliver Cromwell, created a republic, not a monarchy in England. But things turned, all revolutions turn very ugly. So things turned difficult after about 10 years. And then after the death of Cromwell, anarchy broke loose. So the people of England begged the son of the king they beheaded and asked him to come back and rule the government. So this has never happened before. The people decided to behead the king and take power, and then the people decided they just couldn't do it properly. So they brought back the king's son, Charles II. So that particular event took place in the year 1660, and that is Restoration. So if you are studying Renaissance, the literature of the Enlightenment, you would be studying the literature that begins in the year 1660 with the Restoration. Remember, Puritans were basically lower middle class, kind of crude folks. If you think about the Taliban, we are dealing with the Taliban, the Christian Taliban. So they had destroyed the theater, band, actors, pretty much destroyed everything that the Shakespearean legacy, the culture had developed. So the theater came back. All the plays I saw on the Mahatma Gandhi University syllabus are from that particular period. By the way, one of the important figures that we are going to discuss here, John Melton, was one of the people who supported the beheading of the king. After the king was executed, Melton wrote a long essay saying it was the right thing to do, that the people have the power, not the monarch. So can you imagine what would have happened to people who supported the execution, including Melton? Many of them, including Oliver Cromwell, was dug out of their graves and hung. Pretty much everybody who signed that the death warrant were executed and hung in some ways. So it was anarchy again. However, Melton survived because he was already blind, and his greatness as a poet and thinker was widely known. So those who supported the king, some of the poets, you may have read To My Coy Mistress, Andrew Marvell. He was a supporter of the Royalist Party. So he helped Melton, basically saved his neck. So that is the political moment that we are discussing. And then things would go out of control again in the year 1688. The new king's son would have to run away from England because another civil war seemed to be about to break out. So that king's daughter, who was married to a Protestant, William, and his wife, Mary, together came back to England, and they took over the power under the condition that if going forward, the king will not have any power other than just like the kind of power the president of India has. The parliament legislates, and the king only signs on it. So remember that date, 1688. The era of Enlightenment is usually dated from that particular day, 1688, the Glorious Revolution. That's the date. What really happened in that on that date is that the people allowed to keep the king as a kind of symbolic figurehead that is emotionally satisfying for the people. But the king has no power at all other than being the rubber stamp. So you could say at that moment, democracy was born, or democracy that used to exist in Greece and in various other city-states came back into full-fledged operation in England. So I'm going to present as my screen so that you don't have to deal with a lot of the talk on my part. You can see the names, some of the texts. So are you able to see MG University syllabus?
No, sir, no.
No?
No, sir.
Try again. Are you able to see a PowerPoint?
No, sir, no.
No PowerPoint. Okay, let me see what is going on. What do you see now? Do you see answer to the question, what is enlightenment?
Sir, now we can see it.
Okay,
Yes,
you
sir,
can
now we can see. And
you
answer
can
the
see
question.
that. Okay. And now can you see MG University syllabus?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, all
Yes,
right.
sir, yes, yes.
Okay, okay. I picked these texts that your head of the department forwarded to me. So we'll talk about Paradise Lost, Afterben's poem, John Locke's an essay concerning human understanding, Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Woman, Ian Watt's Realism and the Novel, the form, and also the essay by Immanuel Kant and Michel Foucault. And if we have time, maybe quickly glance at Adorno and Horkheimer. By the way, this is very highly sophisticated material. We, at our college, we only rush through these. Locke's essay concerning human understanding, etc. We usually assign a paper based on that for students to study and learn from. Anyway, so let's make our way through the PowerPoint, and here, are you all familiar with the tattoo on the arm? Sapere ode. It is a very common tattoo that you see among college students and even older people. Sapere ode. That means dare to think. Dare to think. That is actually the motto of the Enlightenment. The motto, mudra vakyam of enlightenment. Dare to think. Again, if you remember, throughout the Middle Ages, throughout the Christian Middle Ages, you had no right to think or to read. The parish priest will tell you what to do. That's it. And your life was organized very beautifully too, in terms of various sacraments. So most people who were uneducated, they had no reason to think, they had no ability to think, and they had no right to think. So now that England is a democracy, remember, look at the dates. The Enlightenment, 1660, I would actually say, to the present. It is Enlightenment to the present, not only in England. Enlightenment is the case in Kerala too. So do you see the Malayalam word Kerala Jnanodayam? So I have included some names: Narayana Guru, Sahodaran Ayyappan, Kumaran Ashan, Ayyangali, Poigayil Appachan. When I was growing up, I knew only about Narayana Guru and Kumaran Ashan. Others were hidden. And again, if you look closely, you can see all of the individuals involved are Dalits and very oppressed class members. And the Enlightenment in Kerala began with Ayyankali trying to ride through the public streets on his own Kalavandi, Villuvandi. And Nadar women fighting for the right to wear a blouse. They had to go pretty much naked, topless, because that was how the caste system, which was kind of medieval system. In England, it all came to an end with the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. But in India and in Kerala, it lasted until the beginnings of the 20th century. So we are not talking about simply a period in English literature for students of MA and BA. This is bigger. This is much bigger. Remember some of the critical essays that we touched on in the discussion on Renaissance. It was about whether students of English literature have an obligation to criticize society and obligation to work toward attainment of human dignity for not only the students but also for the whole society. And again, English Revolution and this Enlightenment was the event that created America as a democracy. In the year 1776, America declared independence, and ever since it has been a democracy until one person named Trump seemed to shake it. But democracy has been restored. And the same with the French Revolution, which went totally out of control, and it went into the hands of Napoleon Bonaparte. So what I'm saying is the Enlightenment, even though pratyaksha, it is a great human accomplishment, it also has produced the horrors of war, terrible socio-political transformation, etc. So you all know the term postmodernism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, critical theory, feminism, all those ideas that you hear in English classes, they are largely a rejection of Enlightenment. or a rejection or a critique of enlightenment. So to summarize, enlightenment is simply a new method of thinking, dare to know. So by the end of my lecture the other day, I mentioned that ideas about how to create new science were coming into being at that time. And some of you may have read my Malayalam essay on Francis Bacon, in which I have described this very important transition. So in that sense, this is William Blake's painting of Isaac Newton. As you can see from the background, a human being in the mouth of the cosmos using geometric compass is getting a sense of the scientific layout of the universe. So until Newton came out with the theory of gravity, projecting on his insight into an apple falling, insight about what was holding an apple on the tree. Of course, the stem, but why did it have to fall after severed from the stem? So he projected that on the moon, all the planets, and the cosmos. And for the first time in human history, we came to understand what the hell is going on, where we are, why are we here, etc. So a lot of questions about cosmos suddenly answered, and he was not just going blah blah. He did it using his new language, which was mathematics. Newton devised a system of mathematics that can account for motion, flux, time, rate of change, etc., etc. And he called it calculus. So instead of going blah blah, using calculus, the secret of nature was revealed. So Newton is now considered as the symbol of the Enlightenment. Not just for England. Newton is the symbol of enlightenment for humanity. And Newton's ideas some of them were not entirely correct, and Einstein perfected it. So, but there is a question. Something important happened in England. This happened in England simply for one reason. There was no pope to question anybody. England had set itself free from religious authority. So a whole generation of individuals could dare to think. In Kerala, by 1920, Narayana Guru asked everybody to learn English. And Narayana Guru even said, if it were not for the English people, I would not be allowed to become a monk. The English gave us sannyasam, Guru said. So this is a universal phenomenon, and uniquely English, simply because of this one particular political environment that was conducive for free thinking. Okay, I'm going to go faster. Let me give you, these are some of the great names. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to just point out one name, David Hume, one of the most definitive contributions to the new thinking was the idea or the new method of developing knowledge, empiricism, knowledge based on observation, experimentation, calculation, enumeration, etc. Not just going, not just talking nonsense, right? And one of his long works proves that there cannot be any miracles, no miracles possible. And he also describes how it is possible for somebody to believe in the miracles. So Hume lived in a city called Edinburgh, Scotland. As you can see, there is a huge statue for Hume right in the town, and everybody who passes by him touches his toes. So his toes are burnished and bright, shining bronze. So if you look at the bits of ideas I have included there, he joined the battle on the question of where and how to find truth. And how to distinguish it from falsehood. And some of his famous sayings, all knowledge degenerates into probability. Can you imagine what a medieval saint would have said? All knowledge comes from divine revelation, etc. Here he says, all knowledge is ultimately unsure. It's just probability. And he said, acknowledge uncertainty, acknowledge limits of knowledge. Say, for instance, religious persecution. There was a time, actually contemporary period, when a Catholic was arrested in England, you could be put to death. A Protestant is arrested in Italy, you could be put to death. And the Protestants and Catholics waged a war for 30 years on that question, until finally they decided, actually David Hume and his teacher, inspirer, John Locke, said that no one knows enough about one's belief and religion, not enough to punish somebody else for not believing it. So toleration, the idea of tolerance of other religions become very important. When I was in Edinburgh, walking around, see what I ran into. This is the tomb of David Hume. Within about 3 hours of my visit, I ran into this tomb. And in this very city, you will see the tombs of so many Enlightenment individuals, Adam Smith, for instance, Francis Hutchinson. So just a few minutes about the detail that Enlightenment actually started in Edinburgh. So to illustrate how it worked, let me show you this. Are you able to read the slide? This may not be large enough for you, right? Anyway, just listen. In the year Yeah, in the year 1697, can you imagine? 1697, an 18-year-old boy named Thomas was given death penalty for telling his friends that he didn't believe in Holy Trinity, right? Can you imagine that? In the year 1697, a boy who just told his friends he didn't really believe in the idea of Trinity was taken to court and sentenced to death. That is intolerance. That is primitive savagery of too much certainty about your faith. See what happened 40 years later. 40 years later, after David Hume published this book, book is called An Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding. An Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding. This is an epoch-making book. And in that, it was in that book he proved that you cannot argue that there anything miraculous happened. Of course, people will believe it, and he also described why that happens. So 40 years later, just for writing that book, the city of Edinburgh tried to kick David Hume out of the city. But the city failed 50-17. A vote of 50 over 17, the city decided to keep David Hume. That is enlightenment. Just in 40 years that happened. The difference between this transformation of society. Remember when I walked around that city, I went up on a hill in that city. In the year 1770, a farmer named James Hutton went up on that hill. It's a rocky hill, like Kurshimala. He looked around and found some shapes of fishes so high on the mountain. They were fossils. Again, remember, the year is 1770. Most Christians until that time believed that the earth was created, the world was created, Adam and Eve were created 10,000 years ago. This man, James Hutton, started to think, and he just devoted his life to studying rocks, and he published a book, the first book on geology. And in that book, he claimed that the world is not 10,000 years old. It is where the world has no end or no beginning. And then in the following century, somebody named Charles Lyell was able to study rocks even better, and he made a wild guess that the world is actually the earth is 300 million years old. A man named Erasmus Darwin read that book, and his grandson Charles Darwin would go on to publish Origin of Species. So two great scientific discoveries about humanity. Isaac Newton's theory of gravitation that holds the planets and stars and the cosmos together, and James Hutton's and Lyell's and Charles Darwin's insight on the possibility of a long evolution. Okay, without it, and also very soon, the same guys these are people in a same small town like Kattapara, coming out, Adam Smith wrote the first book on economics and markets. Francis Hutchison created the first idea that the government's job is to ensure greatest happiness for the greatest number. Can you imagine? This is enlightenment. So basically, enlightenment is a secular belief in science and in liberal politics, in private property, in tolerating other people's religions, and tolerating even other people's beliefs in miracles. If you want to believe it, it's all right. We don't care. Go for it. So that is enlightenment. So, and this is where I know it's a long introduction to Melton. We're going to look at Melton. Melton's, the section you have to read is from Paradise Lost. It is the fall of man. Isn't that ironic that the Enlightenment was about the rise of man, right? In Kerala Jnanodayam, what was the belief about the creation of man? Melton's Paradise Lost, a long epic about how God created the universe, how God created the human beings, and how human beings disobeyed God, and how human beings were tempted by the Satan, and how human beings were evicted from paradise, the fall of man. So the Bible gives a lot of answers to, the best effort answers to questions about human existence. And look at the irony. The Enlightenment is about the rise of man. In our tradition, in the Vedic claim about the Brahmins is that the Brahmins were created from the primordial man's head, and Dalits were created from the dirt under the feet. Can you imagine this kind of terrible mechanisms for human oppression? So before jumping into fall of man idea, let me also point out that there is a philosophical enlightenment, a scientific enlightenment, and political enlightenment, and ethical and religious enlightenment. So the ethical and religious enlightenment would go on to create new religious ideas like deism. Anglicanism becomes very nice. Even Catholic Church becomes a decent institution, to the extent that in the year 1943, Pius XII, in a Chakrika Lehanam called Divino Afflando Spiritu, agreed that we were wrong about Luther, and that it is okay for anybody to read the Bible and translate it into Malayalam or any language. Until then, you could be put to death for translating the Bible. Tyndale was put to death. Wycliffe was put to death just for trying to translate the Bible. So even Catholic Church became a good institution because of the total change of ideas and outlook of human beings. Jnanodayam is definitely there. And there were also some horrible consequences of it. For instance, the political enlightenment led to colonialism. The English ended up coming to India and taking over most of India and stealing about $45 trillion worth of goods for several centuries. And by the end of 19th century, the English controlled 1/3 of the face of the earth. It was primarily a consequence of the breakthroughs made possible by the scientific enlightenment and the political enlightenment. So we are talking about a very complex topic. So back to our man, Melton. Melton, I already mentioned that he could have been beheaded for supporting the execution of the king. You might think Melton is a boring person or a kind of primitive, backward-looking person, but he has prevailed. His status has improved even with the feminists. I will outline some of those ideas. He was so brilliant, even at the age of 19, he decided to become the English Virgil or English Homer. And he wrote some of the great literary works about freedom of speech. Areopagitica, I remember when I was a student at St. Thomas College, we had to read the whole thing. And Chummarasara, I think, explained it all to us. We also studied Samson Agonistus, Melton's play that he wrote later in life. So coming back to the rise of man idea, I have to say that the idea of paradise is arguably one of the most politically charged ideas in Europe. Paradise. For instance, in the year 1381, a man named John Ball said the world, there were no feudal lords in paradise. Everybody was equal. So he led a huge army of peasants against the landlords. Can you imagine what they did to him just for saying that people were equal in paradise? Maveli naadu vaanidum kaalam ellavarum onnu pole ennu paranjadupole John Ball claimed paradise was for everybody. Paradisayude avakashigal. So for that crime, he was executed. His body was cut into 4 and sent into various directions of the earth. And throughout 15th century, 16th century, there were issues related to individuals claim that they want to go back to paradise or go back to Maveli naadu vaanidum kaalam. So I have created a slide. I created it just today with the hope that you might get a larger view of what the title itself, Paradise Lost, means. And it has meant ever since Melton's book. So paradise, anybody writing about paradise is in essence writing about our anxieties about whether civilization is good, whether we would have been better off if we had lived in the forest, whether we had lived like tribal people or people in various places, people who still live in the tribal land. Paradise, utopia, Brindavanam. Even the great Kalidasa's Shakuntalam, Abhijnana Shakuntalam, is very consciously about this question. The king, Dushantan, വേട്ടയാടുന്നതിനിടയ്ക്ക് കണ്വാശ്രമത്ത് വെച്ച് ശകുന്തളയെ കാണുമ്പോൾ ദുഷ്യന്തൻ സിറ്റിയുടെ ആള്, very powerful urban modern individual in a sense, sees Shakuntala, who's like Eve, wearing bark clothes, and everybody who came with Dushantan felt that living in the forest with the Kannu and Kannuasramam is so much better than living in the city. You have to pay the rent. If you are living in Kattapana, you have to get ready, get out a bus and go to college. You need a lot of money. Petrol prices are going up. Everybody is very unhappy in the city, whereas if you are in paradise, you are like in Vanaprastham or Devarajyam or Vrindavanam. So in that sense, you all know the name Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, great German philosopher. One of the very first books he wrote, he characterized all our intellectual efforts as a pushback against our Apollonian tendencies and our nostalgic effort to go back to the paradise. So Apollonian means Apollo's, remember, Apollo is Indran, god who is very active, god of the sun, civilization, city life, work, career, the desire to be rich and famous, all of that are Apollonian. So I would say enlightenment is, in Nietzsche's terms, is an Apollonian struggle. So are you people who have everything, good house, cars, are you any happier? Because we have a car and money in the bank, and we are ruled by the great Modi, are we any happier? Are we happy in marriage? Are we happy in nuclear family? So the question is a kind of wistful looking back into the opposite of the Apollonian, which is Dionysian. In Dionysian, you are just Chandagotti party, dance, the Kallam Gudicha, Mattu Padichil, Nalatha Patti Orka, the Jeevikkinnathaanu Dionysian. And of course, we will never be able to be Dionysian, because can we live without our laptops, without electricity, without money, without food 4 times a day? If you live in the forest, you don't go too far. So Apollonian dream, Apollonian dream is Dionysian happiness, going back to paradise. So Melton has written another epic called Paradise Regained. How do you regain paradise? According to Melton, you live like Jesus. Nobody lives like Jesus anymore. Nobody abandons all their wealth and live for the Devarajyam, kingdom of God. but we all want to, or we all claim. So think of much of literature, even before you could divide Greek literature, Renaissance literature, and even Malayalam literature as a Dionysian dream. All of Kadambanitta's poems are Dionysian. All of Ayyappan's poems are Dionysian dreams of city living, salary earning, government employed Apollonians. So that is just the gist of the politics of paradise. And again, we also talked about, so it is a dichotomy. Have you studied the module on romantic poets, Wordsworth, Keats, Shelley, etc.? Have you? The entire romantic tradition is a dream of paradise. It's dream of living like Shakuntala. Dream of, you may have seen Hare Krishna followers. All over Europe, young people who are like hippies in the evenings, they beat the drums and dance to Krishna. They want to be in Vrindavanam, in Italy, in England, and France. I see them all over, dancing away, beautifully. So I would say all of music is Dionysian. All of music is Apollonian people finding a Dionysian consolation, comfort. So, Paradise Lost. Thomas Hobbes said in Paradise, this is one of the most important Enlightenment thinkers, but he was anti-Enlightenment. He said, if you lived in paradise or in the state of nature, without a government, without a law and order, your life will be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. In other words, if we don't have civilization, if we live in paradise, very quickly we will kill each other. So what do we do? And Thomas Hobbes also said, we also have the right to kill somebody because we are just animals. If we want somebody else's apple, we have the right to kill. But he also said, but you are not going to get too far killing somebody. So you created something called a nation or a government, and we gave up our right to kill and steal in exchange for protection of the law. In Kerala, in exchange for the kit from the government and the pensions, stuff like that. So think about it. Enlightenment idea after the Civil War was that we are going to have to need good government. If not, we will create anarchy. We will not be able to go to bed in peace. We will not be able to sleep in peace. We are not likely to wake up because somebody is going to kill you and take your apple. Rousseau, as you know, the founding philosopher of the French Revolution, said Thomas Hobbes is wrong. If we were in paradise, we would have been much happier. The problem is the government. The government taxes you. The king taxes you. The king makes you fight wars. The king makes your life miserable. The king gives you no protection. So we have the right to catch the king and behead him. That's what happened at the French Revolution. Destroy the state. That was the French Revolution. So this is a debate. The debate about whether we will be able to survive in paradise. Poets like Wordsworth and Keats and Shelley, they would all support Rousseau's idea that we have the ability to live in nature at peace, finding happiness. Okay, so this is the debate that Paradise Lost rehearses. How does it begin? Remember the very first passage? Melton sings, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe with the loss of Eden. So loss of paradise, the loss of the Dionysian, he doesn't use the Dionysian phrase, although he knew all of that. He is basically saying, help me tell that story. Heavenly Muse, tell me that story about how one greater man came to restore us to paradise. So, and if you have checked out the Old Testament, you'll see that the story of Adam and Eve is only like a page and a half. And Paradise Lost is 12 books. It takes forever and you fall asleep in about 20 pages. It is wonderful, but whenever I teach it, my students curse me and they hate me. But no question, it's a great book. So let us look at Paradise Lost. I'm going to share with you. By the way, you have only very few lines beginning book 9. What time is it? Is it time to quit? How much more time do I have?
You can.
Can you? I can't.
We have time up to 45. So you can continue.
For 15 more minutes?
Sir, now it's 10:15.
Yes.
Sir, we have no time limit. You can continue.
Okay, tell me how much more time I have, because I have to decide to speed up a little bit, because I have to talk to you about everything at least a little bit.
Okay, sir, sure, sir.
Half an hour?
So you can continue. We have
Okay.
time up to 10:45.
Oh, good. Okay, so book 9, up to book 9, Melton is basically whipping up, puffing up the 1.5 page creation story in the Old Testament. I don't want to go too deep into it. Other than say that Old Testament, about 2,600, 700 a year old work, is a genuine effort of the Semitic people to understand the the basic philosophical questions about who we are, what is the universe, where are we, what are the moral imperatives for us, um, um, and why do we feel sad in our lives? Why are we sinful in our life? We think we are sinful. So the answer is we are sinful because we used to live in a paradise where there was no sin, everything was holy providence, everything was perfect. But because of disobedience, we lost it. We suffered a fall, and that has made us sinful and also made us sad in our life and unhappy. So we are going to be punished. We are already punished in that sense. So all of these are beautifully narrated. By the way, it is in blank verse. This is the first time a poet has written an epic in blank verse. You may remember I told you blank verse in England was devised and used for the first time by Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey for the first time. So this is no rhyming, but pentameter. At the start of book 9, Satan has heard about the creation of human beings, Adam and Eve. Satan is so jealous. Satan has been kicked out of heaven, and he has been charged with the task of doing a contract on Adam and Eve, basically. So he comes in and finds a serpent. The serpent, him fast sleeping soon, he found in labyrinth of many a round self-rolled, his head the mist well stored with subtle wiles. And the devil through the mouth of the snake entered. And at this point, I'm going to show you the text of that Paradise Lost. The book 9 also has something very special going on. Melton actually speaks in his own voice, and he tells us that please, Muse, help me tell the story. I wanted to tell this long time ago, long choosing, but I have not been able to get started. I am beginning late. Now I am also blind. I am terrible situation. I explained all of that. So tell me how to describe how Satan seduced the woman first and the man second. The woman seduced the man second. I can't help but pointing out this particular passage. Early on, Melton is showing off this more seat-worthy of gods as built with second thoughts, reforming what was old, for what God after better worse would build. So Satan already the snake is looking at the earth and saying, and looking at the universe and saying, terrestrial heaven danced round by other heavens that shine, yet bear their bright officious lamp, light above light for thee alone seems, etc. Concentric, centering. By the way, remember, Melton personally met Galileo, who corrected the human error in thinking that the cosmos, everything rotates around the earth. But even though he knew that, the serpent is rehearsing the old idea that all the planets are all, oh heaven, which is earth, oh earth, I see the cosmos paying homage to you, etc., etc. Okay, and I'm going to jump about 500 lines. The snake has talked to Eve. So the moment Eve hears, by the way, from the feminist point of view, it might look like Eve is being presented as a foolish girl, but from a 21st century point of view, she comes off as a smart girl. And first of all, she had told her husband Adam that she wanted to divide the labor. She wanted to work in a garden on her own, far away from him. She didn't want to put up with him. So that was why snake was able to find her alone. And when the snake speaks, she is surprised. The language of man pronounced by tongue of brute and human sense expressed. So this is really a wonderful passage, but you don't have to read it. But basically, the snake tells her that the serpent tells her that if you eat this fruit, you will be like gods. You will be very intelligent. You will be, see, look at me. I ate it, and I can now talk, and I am very smart. Just drink it, and you eat it, you'll be fine. So remember sapere ode? So that word is here also. Virtuous, and in turning to the tree, precious of all trees in paradise, operation blessed to sapiens, which is in other words means tree of knowledge. So by the end of that scene, she has taken control of her life, and she has decided, she has dared to think, although it looks like she is foolish, and anybody reading Paradise Lost as a believer might think she was as a disobedient, sinful woman. But anybody reading Eve as a feminist, from a feminist lens, you would see her as a smart girl, and I like her already. But to Adam, so she ate, and she's wondering what is she going to do with Adam? She loves him. So this is how the line goes: how will I appear to Adam, but keeps the odds of knowledge in my power without co-partner. For a split second, she wonders whether she could keep her new knowledge of the tree of life, tree of knowledge, to herself. and she could be even more powerful. She could compensate for what women lacks, etc. All the misogynist thinking she counters, and then she thinks about Adam marrying another Eve, and which she doesn't want to see. So after some careful thinking, she is resolved that she would share it with Adam. Adam, in the meanwhile, is she misses her, and he weaves a garland for her, and surprised to see her coming with an apple in her hand, and she tells him that morn when first they parted by the tree. Oh, sorry, say that's where they parted. Hath been the cause and wonderful to hear. This tree is not, as we are told, a tree of danger. So it says, by the way, God, that old guy, the old dude, he tricked us, played a trick on us. As we are told, a tree of danger. It's not a tree of danger. It is not an evil. To open eyes and make them gods who taste and have been tasted such, the all-knowing serpent said, has eaten, he is not dead, is become not dead, as we are threatened, but thenceforth endued with human voice and human sense, reason. The snake has become like an enlightenment intellectual. He is smart. All it took was eating this fruit. So please, therefore also you should eat, that equal lot may join us, equal joy, equal love. I think Melton, who writes these lines, is not a limited genius. He's great. And look at the rest of the lines. And when she says that the garland he had in his hand just falls off, he has heard some terrible thing this woman has told him of fairest creation, last and best of all God's work, etc., etc. But in the end, Adam agrees to eat, and he eats. And as you can see, the moment he ate, she gave him of that fair enticing fruit with the liberal hand. He scrupled not to eat against his better knowledge, not deceived, but fondly overcome with the female charm. Earth trembled. So this is like a cosmic event, a human being acquiring the forbidden knowledge, mortal sin, original. And the moment he ate, as with the new wine, intoxicated, both they swim in mirth and fancy that they feel divinity within them breathing wings. The divinity is lust, the pleasure of the body. In lust they burn, much pleasure we have lost while we abstained. Look what we did. We wasted our time. Our love in marriage was what a bore compared to what we have just accomplished. So he grabs her, her hand he seized, and to a shady bank, thick overhead, they lie down, and they make love. The way it is described is that a greatest human accomplishment that God did not want on earth. And what happened at the end? Their eyes, how opened, and their minds darkened. So maybe that has happened to all of us. We understand certain things, our eyes are open, but we are also saddened, our minds are darkened. In the sense that as a veil had shadowed them from knowing ill was gone. So Adam and Eve are no longer innocent. They know the forbidden knowledge. So what is the forbidden knowledge? I'm going to exit out of this and go back to the next slide. This is a Masaccio painting, an early Renaissance painting on the left. Early Renaissance, still medieval feelings about what a terror it was for human beings to lose the garden, the original garden. I have already told you it is living in the forest, living in caves, drinking, singing, dancing, living at night, not even living during the day, not different from animals. But without the sorrows that you have in civilization, worries about money, all of that. So this is the very last lines of Paradise Lost. Just take a look. Some natural tears that dropped, but wiped them soon. The world was all before them. Where to choose their place of rest, and providence their guide, they hand in hand, man and woman, human and human, with the wandering steps and slow through Eden, took their solitary way. Blake, who created an image of it, shows this as a great human accomplishment. Solidarity. You and I are, in that sense, all of us have been evicted from paradise, and we know one thing, which is that we are mortal, and we are very uncomfortable in our body. We have to work, earn our bread from the sweat from our brows, etc., etc. So what is the real meaning of the Adam and Eve story in the Bible is one of the great debates. And what exactly it was that they learned by eating from that tree. By the way, there was also another tree, the tree of life, and God kicked them out before they could eat from that tree. If we had eaten from that tree, we would have been immortal. We would have been without death. So no question that the Old Testament story is telling us that the meaning of Paradise Lost is, in other words, human recognition that we are just human beings and that we are going to die. We have only each other. So better we take each other's hand and walk the solitary way. and you have to choose the place of your rest. So if you read the rest of the chapters in the Bible, then you realize the story of the first murder, and then the story of the first civilization, the first language, music, architecture, all of that created by the children of the murderer Cain. So in that sense, anybody who wants to study English literature and to get to the bottom of its meaning will have to reckon with this idea that paradise, that we lost paradise, and from time to time we think we can regain it. So all of romantic poetry is that effort. You see Shakespeare's plays and poems playing with that idea, the idea of the pastoral. I'm going to stop there and quickly go through Kant's idea how to turn. So once we are out of paradise, remember Hobbes said, without the government, we are going to kill each other. And we saw what Cain did to Abel. And we saw in all the stories that follow about the horrible things human beings are capable of doing. So it was understandable that we would have to fence various areas of paradise as private property, 1 acre, 2 acres, 10 acres, 1,000 acres, stuff like that. And we need government's assistance in organizing life outside of the garden where a lot of people are there. So that takes us to Immanuel Kant's question, what is enlightenment? We already mentioned that it is about the need for human beings to grow up. Beautiful passage. I have a copy of it here, but I simply don't have the time to go through it. But just remember this passage. Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher, who was asked to define enlightenment, he said, enlightenment is an effort or the process of exiting from self-imposed stupidity. Until the Enlightenment, we stupidly depended on authorities, powerful people, religious ideas, etc. It's time to stop that. And he discusses the details of it. He says, of course, it is easier to be stupid, but we are going to have to stop for start thinking. Oh, by the way, authority will tell you, church will tell you, state will tell you. In India, your caste will tell you, don't think, just follow orders. And if you are like that, then you are anti-enlightenment. You are not you are immature. You are still in the dark ages. You do not dare to think. And a very beautiful, very short essay. And then the final argument is that, so what is the obligation of the government? Kant was a close friend of Frederick the Great, the German king, who was an Enlightenment philosopher also. So what is government's obligation? what is Pinarayi Vijayan's obligation toward us? It is to enable us to live with each other happily without starving. Being able to talk about whatever you want. So we need freedom for public use of reason. That is, in other words, we need conditions suitable for freedom of conscience. So in that sense, Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar, all those great leaders of India, they were all continuing Immanuel Kant's project. I asked Gandhi's grandson whether Gandhi read all of these things when he wrote Hind Swaraj. He didn't think Gandhi understood any of these directly, but he had imbibed the English tradition of fair play, rule of law, etc. as a lawyer. Okay. And having said that, Michel Foucault, you all know the name. She died in 1983, very important philosopher, but he's an anti-Enlightenment philosopher. So looking back, he's asking whether we are enlightened. And if you look around in Kerala, we are still very much bound by caste, right? Young people may be able to marry for love, but most people are not capable of daring to think. That is the case in America, in Europe, everywhere. In spite of all the accomplishments, Enlightenment project is still way behind. So after a lifetime pushing back against Kant's other ideas like pure reason, practical reason, a priori, a posteriori, moral imperative, etc. He likes this essay, but he says Kant is kind of wrong about all of these, and concludes the essay by saying modernity as the heroic tendency the heroic will to grasp the present. I don't know whether we in India or in America have the heroic will anymore to change our society, to allow freedom and dignity for all. So Foucault thinks we have not accepted immaturity. In that sense, he might even be supporting Rousseau's claim that Enlightenment arguments were wrong, and that we would be better off in the forest, we would be better off in paradise. John Locke is a philosopher you have to study. I was planning to go through that essay. I can write something for you if you want. Some materials are in the slide that can help. Since we don't have a lot of time, I just want to introduce Mary Wollstonecraft. So women had no presence in most of these. Lady Margaret Cavendish was almost an equal to Hobbes and and Locke, etc. But they all kind of rejected her, laughed at her. Mary Wollstonecraft was one of the women who participated in the French Revolution. She actually saw Louis XVI being arrested before, days before he was going to be beheaded. And she came out of all of that and wrote. By the way, she criticized the Paradise Lost in her Vindication of the Rights of Woman. There are various passages in which Mary Wollstonecraft develops her argument about the need for giving women justice, not charity. I wish to persuade women to endeavor to acquire strength both of mind and body. What women want is not power over men, but power over themselves. Look at the date. She lived only like 30 plus years, 38 years, I think. And she died soon after giving birth to a child who will grow up and would marry the great romantic poet Shelley. And she would go on to write the immortal romantic novel Frankenstein. So this is arguably one of the greatest feminist accomplishments of the Enlightenment. By the way, she also started a school for women in London in her final years. So until then, there was no place a woman could go to get an education. So even England, in spite of all of these talk about Enlightenment, they were way behind. Just a few words about Rise of the Novel. Beautiful, beautiful book. I love it. I read it with great delight. And Ian Watt describes why in this moment the new literary form novel had to come into being. If you think about the novel Pamela, you will realize it's a story, a whole book about a girl, a young woman, and her love. And the next novel Samuel Richardson wrote was 1 million words long. It is Clarissa, another novel about another 1 million words about one girl and her love. So what Ian Watt is saying is that novel became possible because of the kind of insights about humanity that Enlightenment made possible, particularly in the book by John Locke. And so in that sense, the new genre of novel is in a way a kind of evolution of all our literary traditions. And so novel is a product of democracy in that sense. A novel is a product of equality. A novel becomes possible when servant women and ordinary people were able to buy a book or pick up a book and read for themselves. So again, I don't know whether you need any further details about it. I can talk a lot about the novel as a form, but the basic idea is that it was ultimately the right time, the novel to come into being. the right time for Shakespeare to appear was when there were city people who wanted entertainment, so theater developed. And in 18th century, novel developed because there was printing press. Samuel Richardson was actually a printer. He didn't have enough stuff to print, so he wrote his own stuff. That is novel, Pamela and Clarissa. So with that, I am concluding, and I am open for questions if we have time. I'm going to stop presenting.
Yes, sir, we have a question. Sir, we have a
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Sir, my question is, why did the Romancist, Postmodernist, and other people rejected Enlightenment?
Because Enlightenment created terrible things like imperialism, conquest of India, Africa. To some extent, early part of the Enlightenment also included slave trade, and later part of Enlightenment created ideas about ending the slave trade. But ultimately, the reason was that it has not made people happy. People are richer, science develops, medicine develops, industrial revolution comes around, and terrible urbanization, trains start to run, culture changes. So romantic poets were basically reacting to the radical changes in society. In somewhat the way we are reacting to pandemic, some people are fighting about the masks, stuff like that. So it was a philosophical pushback against Enlightenment, and deconstruction and Michel Foucault. So basic claim is that there is no verifiable truth, no ultimate truth. So and there is no basis. So that was the beginning of the questioning. It's a very, I would say it is the same debate between Dionysian and the Apollonian. Go ahead. Do you have more questions?
Sir, we have one more question from Rosita.
Sir, you said if you, so I think, I don't know whether I understood you properly. You said if you want to reclaim paradise, we have to live in communes. So my question is this, Israel has been experimenting with these communes, kibbutz I think, and they are giving it up. So what is your opinion about that idea? I don't know whether I have got it clearly.
Yes, you're right. You're right. All I'm saying is throughout civilization, development of civilization, the moment we started creating civilization and living in cities, we started to look back to the old type, living in communes, etc. But we know that it won't work. We will not be able to go back to paradise. Yeah. And Nietzsche figured that out. So we are all Apollonian. We are all people of civilization. So I would say all romanticism is just a fantasy. It has no possibility of coherent meaning. So postmodernism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, all of those are basically questioning it in that sense. Yeah. So there is no real possibility of living in the commune. We can only fantasize about it.
So one
Will-
more
will
question,
you-
sir. One
Yeah,
more
go ahead.
question. Because
Yeah.
can I have one more question? Can I ask you one more question?
Please, I can spend another
So my
hour
question,
if you want.
no, my question is, you were saying that it is Cain's progeny that created art and all those things.
Yes.
See, didn't you see that? Because Abel was murdered and there was only Cain. And it is his progeny that created all the art, everything. Can you
Yes.
explain it further?
It's but remember,
So so in the Bible, Cain is not presented as a good person.
no,
So
that's not.
everything originated from.
Yeah, see what God said to Cain? I will protect you. I will punish anybody who attacks you 77 times. And Cain's son Enoch and their future generations slowly build a civilization. That is the biblical story. In other words, what we are saying is the meaning of it, we are all children of murderers. Are we not? If we are part of nations, we are children of murderers, Cain's. So whoever wrote, we know who wrote it. 4 different people contributed to Old Testament. So it is their metaphoric understanding about human construction of civilization and the cost of it. The cost of it is violence, murder. Yes. And did I answer your question?
So yes, sir, yes, you did.
You will have to read the Bible in hermeneutic way.
Bible.
Yeah, in a hermeneutic way. You have to interpret it. And then you will see that every bit of the story has an identifiable meaning. The meaning is, as I understand it, is that we lost paradise when we created civilization. And a lot of religious ideas is about how to resist civilization, wearing sackcloth and living like monks and Kurishimala. Kurishimala ashram is definitely a paradise fantasy. All these great writers of the Middle Ages, they had a clear understanding of what I am saying. It is about the cost of civilization on the individual. It's about the alienation from nature. So alienation from nature makes us sad. Music comforts us. And love is a consolation. But we need money, we work, I remember that was one of the first curses. You will toil, live with the bread you earn from the sweat of your brow. So every one of us is struggling to work and keep up with the civilization. So romantic poetry and every kind of romantic aspiration, music, art, it's all going back to Maveli Naadu Vanidam Kalam. More questions?
No, sir.
We are looking forward to undergraduate class in the
So we are looking forward to hear you more on our next class. On our next class, maybe on the next
You
week,
know,
right, sir?
do you realize
On
that
10th.
I don't teach any of this anymore? So I have to go, I have to study all of this and write and create everything. Okay, I will. So send me an email about the text that you want me to discuss.
Okay, sir. Sure, sir. We will send.
Okay. Can you tell me whether
Sir,
it was intelligible?
sir, we have one more question from Rosanna, ma'am.
Please. Hello.
Can we? Yes, sir.
Hello, Rosanna Miss. What is the question?
Sorry, sir. Yes, I am sorry to tell you, but I don't remember the name of that Italian author who has written a novel. The name of the rose or something like that.
That is
So,
Umberto
do you
Eco.
think? I think there is a.
Yes.
Yes, Umberto Eco. So
Yes.
he has written a book. The name of the book or something.
Yes.
So I think. Do you think in that book I came across the idea that it's. Aristotle had written on comedy. Am I right? And
Yes.
those papers were lost or something like that. They came across in that. Is that right? Am I right when I say that?
Yes, it is a
Aristotle's
novel
politics. Aristotle had written.
with the conceit.
Actually, this is my question. We
Yeah.
learned that
Can you say it again?
Aristotle had written on tragedy, but he had written on comedy also, but those
Yes.
papers were lost. And
Yes.
something like that I came across. Am I right? That is what I wanted.
Correct. So it was a conceit on the part of the novelist Umberto Eco that that monastery had a copy of the second volume of Aristotle's Poetics, and
Poetics, yes.
yeah, the conceit was that that book was about laughter. That it was Aristotle's.
So I just wanted to know.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just asked. I just wanted to know whether what I thought about it was correct. I just wanted to know that.
Yes, it is correct. It
I
is.
am answered, sir. It's no problem.
Yes.
That's no
Yeah,
problem.
it is about
But I just.
the non-existent second volume of Aristotle's Poetics, and the conceit is that it tells you about the secret of laughter, and a monk who gets control of that book doesn't want that to spread. He doesn't want monks to laugh. He wants monks to be serious. So laughter would be getting out of paradise, right? Getting into civilization. So that murder a series of murders committed on anybody who tried to read that book. And the detective father, Brother Baskerville, figures it out. And there is a whole chapter about what was in that book, which was basically invented by Echo. So, any more questions?
I wanted to know whether I had understood. Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now we'd like to have Mr. Silas, Assistant Professor, Department of English, for the word of thanks.
Please.
Respected Dr. Thomas Palakkeel, Head of the English Department, Ms. Anshu Varki, Professor Rosina Davis, teachers, and my dear students. We are so blessed to have you with us for this wonderful webinar series. On behalf of Department of English, let me express my sincere gratitude for this great, wonderful section. Sir, thank you so much, dear Thomas Palakkeel, sir. Let me extend my deep gratitude to our dear HOD, Ms. Anshu Varki, and also I am expressing my gratitude to Professor Rosina Davis, and thanks to all teachers who gave their maximum support for the success of this webinar series. And last but not least, I am expressing my gratitude to all students for your support and cooperation for this class. Once again, I am thanking to all who support and participate in this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure gathering all these materials, and see you soon.
So it was really, in fact, a nice journey, because we have got a wonderful insight into what enlightenment is, and dare to think. That was really striking, and it was a nice journey through Melton, Foucault, Locke, Wollstonecraft, Ian Watt, and so on. Thank you so much, and we are looking more and more to hear from you. Good night, sir. Take care.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.